Hello everybody, welcome back. Today I will show you and give you the secret key to all music. You can study scales and chords and songs all day, but all you see in the end is just numbers on a tab. But if you want to write music and improvise more freely, or simply just enjoy your time with the instrument a lot more, follow me for this brief but deep little lesson on music intervals. While we often say that a certain scale or chord or even a chord progression is made up of certain notes, just knowing the notes is not really telling us anything about the scale itself. For example, you might know that C major is made up of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, but if that's all you know, it's really not going to do anything for you if you want to play E major, or if you want to play A major, even less if you want to go into C Dorian or C minor. You would still have to memorize every single instance of every single scale in every single key, or for chords, every single root, and so on. Whereas if we start seeing scales as secondary to the actual structure of the scale itself, then we'll be able to go in there and figure out the DNA of it. And by that I mean that we'll be able to understand why a certain scale or a certain chord sound the way they do. We'll be able to predict what they sound like before we play them, so our improvisation and composition will be a lot deeper and a lot more powerful. We'll be able to predict how a scale works on top of a chord. We'll be able to figure out stuff by ear a lot easier and quicker. The advantages are unlimited, but in order to compile this DNA, we do need, as we said, intervals. An interval is simply the distance between a note and any other note. So today we'll learn how to recognize and understand and name every single interval. So next time you're jamming along in C and you run into that A flat and you love the sound of it, instead of getting lost into the specifics, you'll be like, hey, I know that, it's a flat 6 or a minor 6th, and now I can use it in any key that I want. So first of all, how many intervals are there? Well, we know that if we start from any note, let's call that our root or tonic, or even easier, our note 1. If we go up 8 notes or 8 intervals, we find what we all know is called the octave, which is the same note at a higher pitch. So whatever we do has to happen between this first note here and the octave. So to figure out what happens between the 1 and the 8, and I've seen methods that are really complicated, I developed this little system which is 2 steps, and they're very simple. And the first step is incredibly easy. What I want you to do is simply count on your fingers. Let's say I want to learn what the 6th of C is. All I do is C, D, E, F, G, A. Just as simple as that. If I want to learn what the 3rd of E is, I would go E, F, G. I call this the interval quantity because it tells us in broad strokes what the note that we need is. It doesn't give us, unfortunately, all the specifics of it, and for that we'll need step 2, the quality. But before we continue, let's try a couple more so you can play along with me. Let's all do the 4th of B. I'll give you a couple of seconds, and hopefully you said E. B, C, D, and E. Let's do one more. The 5th of D. Did you say A? D, E, F, G, A. So I let you practice this a little more and we'll get back for step 2. So we now know there are 7 quantity distances before we reach the octave and start over again. But a lot of you also know that in Western music, at least, we divide the octave into 12 sounds. We actually have 12 possible intervals. As symbolized on a keyboard, you'll see that every 12 keys it repeats modularly. On the guitar you have the double dot on the 12th fret, which symbolizes that the guitar then starts over again an octave higher. So how do we square this? To make this so simple a child could understand it, let's just draw up a little table. Let's set C as our starting point. We call it the tonic, that's our first note. And then of course at the very end of the table, 12 notes higher, we'll have to have another C as our octave, where things will just start all over again. And now in between these 2 Cs, here they are, the only 11 other notes in our musical system. If you can understand this, there is literally nothing else. Starting from Monteverdi and Mozart all the way up to Metallica and Black Sabbath, it's all here. Now, to fill in this whole table, we need to move on to step 2, which is quality of intervals. And let's get right to it. So intervals that are seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths come in 2 flavors, in 2 qualities. They're called minor and major. Minor is the little one and major is the bigger one. So a minor second will be closer to the first note, and then the major second will be right after. Then the minor third comes next, and the major third. We're going to skip the 3 columns in the middle for just a second, and on the other side we'll find minor 6th, major 6th, minor 7th, and major 7th. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could do the same thing with 4ths and 5ths and have a very simple table with minors and majors all over? The problem is, if we did that, we'd have 7 intervals multiplied by 2, we'd end up with 14 notes, and we don't have them. We only got 12. So for 4ths and 5ths, we're actually going to call them perfect. And a perfect 4th sits right after the major 3rd, and the perfect 5th sits right before the minor 6th. As you notice, there's still 1 column to go, and the perfect 4th and perfect 5th, they don't get modified by calling them minor or major, but instead they're called augmented or diminished. As you might guess, an augmented 4th is a half step higher than a perfect 4th, and a diminished 5th is a half step lower than a perfect 5th. For most users, we can get away with simply having an augmented 4th and a diminished 5th, so we'll ask them to share this column here. After all, they are the same sound, just different names. As you go deeper and deeper into music theory, you might run into stranger names such as augmented 5th, or even diminished 7th and augmented 2nds, and so on. We'll touch upon those towards the end of the video for those of you who want to go a little deeper, but even if you just learn this, it will be a huge step. So now let's get to the music. Let's get a starting note, a tonic or a root, C in this case, and let's follow the 2-step method, which is so easy, and fill up this whole thing. So first of all, we go with quantity, which is the simplest of all. If it's called a second, C, D. It will have to be a D. If it's called a third, it will have to be E. 4ths are Fs, and 5ths are Gs, and 6ths are As, and 7ths are Bs. There is no escaping that. For some of you, you might think, why is that so important? That's actually a cardinal rule of intervals and understanding music in general. A third is a third. So a third of C is E. It can't be any other note. Keep this in mind. Sometimes you'll be tempted to change the names, but we will not. A third is a third. Now that step 1 is completed and we have the quantity for each of our intervals, let's get down to quality. All we have to do is simply make sure that there's only a half step between every column and the one next to it. So if we start from C, we find that the minor 2nd right now says D, but D is not a half step. And so we put a flat in there, and we make sure that from C to D flat is a half step. Then it's a half step again from D flat to D, so great. From D to E is not a half step, so let's put a E flat in there. And then E to F is a half step, so we're good. F sharp is the augmented 4th, which has to share the column with the same sound, so we'll go with G flat, same exact note, just different names. Perfect 5th is G, we're good. A flat will have to be our minor 6th to keep the half step going. A is our major 6th. B flat is our minor 7th. B is our major 7th. And indeed, B to C is a half step and takes us right back to the octave or tonic again. And so this is all you have to do. I'm going to do one more for you really quickly. Let's do E, which is a bit different. So first of all, we go by quantity. E, F is second, G third, and so on, A, B, C, and D. And now let's keep those half steps going. E to F, we're good. F sharp will have to be our major 2nd. F sharp to G, we're good. G to G sharp again. And then A sharp will be shared with B flat. B is our perfect 5th. C is our minor 6th. C sharp is our major 6th. D is our minor 7th, D sharp is our major 7th, and we can kind of use that last step to check that we did everything all right. D sharp to E, again, puts us right where we want to be. And now, of course, I want you to do this with every other note. If you're new to this, I don't mind you doing it just starting with natural notes, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's already plenty of work. It will put you in some weird spots sometimes. You'll find a B sharp, you might find an F flat, and you'll be like, what should I do? Just follow the steps. If the quantity fits with an F, and you have to call it F flat to fit it in, call it F flat. And the same goes for B sharp or whatever it is. Now, if you want to go a little deeper, you could actually do the same thing again, but starting with a flat note or a sharp note. And this can get you into deeper waters. You can get some double sharps and some double flats and some really strange names. But of course, I do encourage you to do it, and feel free to try it. As a matter of fact, at the end of this video, I leave up a full table with all the solutions to this, and full screen so you can take a screenshot and make sure you're doing it correctly. Even better, if you want to, you can download the PDF of this on my Patreon, along with a little extra lesson I did on there about interval Sudoku, which is a great game that I made up that will help you memorize this whole thing, because once you have it really within your ear and your mind, the way you interface with the guitar or whatever instrument you are working with is just revolutionized completely. Now, earlier in the video, I promised you I would tell you about some stranger names and applications for intervals. If you really go deep within scales, and especially chords and complex chords, you will start finding some stranger names. You will find augmented fifths. You will find, for example, diminished seventh we talked about. You will find augmented seconds, then nines, and so on. And it's really not that complicated, and here's how you navigate that. So we said that the fourths and fifths, the perfect intervals, get either diminished or augmented, which means they go lower by a half step or higher. Minor and major intervals can also be diminished or augmented. So you can actually go lower than a minor seventh. It will be a diminished seventh. In the key of C, the major seventh is B, the minor seventh is B flat, and if you want a diminished seventh, you will have to go B double flat. Now you might say, well, why not just call it A? Well, because A is a sixth, remember, quantity? So now your diminished seventh chord will have a sixth and no sevenths. So in the long run, it really pays off for you to just learn the intervals for what they are. If it's a B double flat, you don't mind. Another example, if I want to have an augmented second, you will usually see it as an augmented ninth, but it's the same thing. So an augmented second in a chord means in the key of C, I will have my D flat as minor second, my D as major second. The augmented second will be D sharp, and you'll be, again, why don't you just call it D flat or a minor third? Well, because that chord that has an augmented second might already have a third. Actually, usually it's a major third because it's a dominant chord, and then I can't have two thirds, can I? I should have a ninth or a second that tells me something right in the name of the chord, and I know exactly what it sounds like. Okay, so if this doesn't make sense to you, it's no problem at all. But if you get there, make sure you watch the video again, and it will all make sense. If you want to see it in action, I'll link two videos above. One has basically every single guitar scale out there, and the other one is every single chord. Now, they're pretty long videos. One of them is 8.5 hours long, but in it, you'll see extensive use of intervals as explanations for why certain chords work a certain way, of why you can use certain scales with them, and it all revolves around what intervals do we have and what intervals do we apply to whatever situation. And now I'll turn it over to you. I can't wait to read your comments below. Let me know if this has helped you make sense of intervals, or if it's your first introduction to them or you were already familiar. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, you want to share your experience, because we're all in this together and I think we can all help each other out. If you'd like to give the video a like and a subscribe, it certainly helps, but no matter what you do, I'll see you on the next one.